So today we have author Stephanie Miller, and she is the author of the book, The Butterfly Blueprint, which we've been going through the devotionals. I'll be putting out another one this afternoon. Yes, that book, it is very, very good. Highly encourage anybody to go and read that book. She has some real gems in there. So why don't you start out just telling us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do?
That's so funny. This is like one of the hardest questions to answer,
It
right? Like,
is.
because you
I always
want to
start
just
off
like
with
say all of the things. So my name is Stephanie Miller. I am an author. I am a speaker, and I also am a writing coach, helping other writers and other wannabe authors get their God-given message out into the world. That's professional. Personally, I am a wife, a mom. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and we are expecting a third in the end of summer. So
it.
busy, busy,
Congrats.
busy. And for fun, not that you're asking me, but I'm gonna throw it in there. Why not? I like to read. I like to spend time with friends, and I also like to paint. I'm not a good painter. Don't think that I am, but painting is just one of those creative outlets that I've been able to tap into and really enjoy. And I'm so honored to be here, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And yeah, art is fantastic and writing as well. Like I love writing poetry. I'm an author of a few
Yes.
published books, but it is definitely something I've always enjoyed. I've been reading since I was like reading Western since I was in like grade 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been something. And then now I do artwork out of recycled jewelry
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
as well. And I'm working with if you watch Dawn's interview, I'm
Mhm.
actually probably going to be starting to work with her and her charity and using my art. So I think that is really cool. A connection that God has made through these interviews, which is
Right
fantastic.
there. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the creative process is a spiritual process too. And like
So
it
much so.
just multiplies in all of the different areas.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us your testimony? How did you come to know Christ and how has he been using you now?
So this is also one of those things, right? Where it can be a long story. You can throw details in. But the main thing is I grew up in an alcoholic and a dysfunctional household where I developed a lot of negative thoughts and patterns and beliefs about myself. And from a result of that, I struggled to really receive like the worth and the value and honestly the love and the acceptance that I really craved. So it wasn't until a whole host of events, right? I feel like we have to have kind of a breakdown before we have a breakthrough. But it was a whole host of things that happened where I was at one of my lowest points. And I was taken to a concert. Chris Tomlin. I'm sure you guys are familiar
Love
with
Chris
with
Tomlin.
Chris Tomlin. Yes, it was. I think it was called like the Alive concert. So a coworker of mine took me to this concert, and this might get me emotional. I'm sorry. Um, it was one of those things where Chris Tomlin comes up on stage and he's like, "Listen, it doesn't have to be the way that you think it has to be right now. There is another way. Like, just surrender, just give yourself over." And at that point, I remember being like, I'm trying everything that I know what to do. Like, I'm trying to fill that void and that emptiness within me, and it's not working. So maybe there's something to what he is saying. So at that moment, in that crowd with all those people listening to that song, I can still remember the lyrics of the song, but I can't remember the title of the song. But it's when your blood ran red and my sins washed right. I owe all to you. So it was just such a beautiful blessing to like give it over and release it and say, okay, Lord, like I'm ready. I'm ready to try your way. I'm ready to see what you have for me. Um, and I'm ready to stop living, not to purposefully bring it back to my book, but I'm ready to stop living like a caterpillar. I'm ready to stop living with just a limited mindset and a limited perspective. And I'm ready to see what purpose you have for me and what plan you have for my life. So that really was kind of the epitome of when I first declared and decided to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And then, of course, you know, you have these really high highs, like you're so excited, you're on top of the world. You're like, yes, I'm a Christian. What does this mean? I don't know, but I'm going to find it out and do all the things.
And I'm just
And
looking up the name of
then,
that song while you're
are you? Okay,
yeah.
good, good. Um, and, but then stuff happens, right? Like life happens, like storms come, circumstances happens, and then like your foundation that you think you're building gets shaken. And what happened from that is that I reverted back into some of my old patterns and my old ways and my own thoughts and behavior. And as a result of reverting back, then it was kind of like, okay, you're no longer a caterpillar again, you're a butterfly. Like, let me show you that whole process. So, really, the testimony was the initial, like, enough is enough, I've had it. But then the whole testimony of my God story really has been like, God continuing to show up and show his faithfulness and goodness and continuing to do things in my life and inspire me in the midst of just pain and grief and sorrow and holding joy and grief at the same time.
Yeah, that's a very important message, and I'm slightly jealous because I would love to go to a Chris Tomlin concert. He's so great at getting the audience involved in worship and just focusing on glorifying God. He is just one singer that I absolutely have so much respect for. And I think he's doing such great work for the Lord. And the name of that song is At the Cross, Love Ran Red.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And how perfect is
the
that?
The lyrics are popping through my head as when you said it. I'm like, oh, I can hear this song.
Yeah. And normally I can't remember it, but I was thinking about it earlier and I was like, yeah, it was those words in that song. And
yeah. He definitely is very powerful, and yeah, it's important for people in all walks of life to have their voices heard and be used. And that's why I think all these testimonies here are so great to get from everybody is to hear all that. So when you went to write your book, The Butterfly Blueprint, what inspired you to start writing this and to put so much of your soul into this book?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I feel like I've always wanted to be a writer and an author. And it was something that I used to love to do as a kid. I would write, creative nonfiction or creative fiction stories and then poetry and things like that. So writing was always kind of like my creative outlet, and journaling was my creative outlet too, especially with the circumstances that I was dealing with, in my teenage and in my childhood years. So I feel like God was setting kind of a foundation for that. And then if you compile the second layer on of becoming a life coach, I became a spiritual growth coach first before I, transitioned into helping other writers and people share their God-given story and message. But if you compound that with that, the message that really came to mind was this, and you're going to laugh at this because this is not what the book is about at all, but it was a 5 keys to spiritual growth and transformation. So originally the idea was, okay, here are your 5 keys to spiritual growth and transformation. So I wrote it out the way that I thought it needed to be written out, the way that I was inspired. And then I got stuck. And then I got like, okay, I don't know what else to write. There wasn't enough to be a full book, but it felt like it was missing something. And I didn't want to just put words in to put words in. So I got stuck, and then I found out I was pregnant with our second. And then I said, okay, Lord, I know that if you have called me to write this book, that I can put this book on hold, and then you will let me know when I am to pick this book back up and finish it. So that's what I did. I got stuck, and that things grinded to a halt in the writing of the book. And then, life went on. I had a child. And then the beginning of the next year, I felt like that nudge and that pull, like, okay, like let's pick up that book and let's finish it. And then that is when the whole butterfly was inspired. That's when the whole butterfly blueprint actually came to mind. So the inspiration, it was like I was going at it my way, but I actually needed to let go of my preconceived notion of what it would look like to share my message and story, and allow just God's wisdom and God inspiration to come in and share the wisdom of making the butterfly blueprint, where we move from the egg to the caterpillar to the cocoon to the actual butterfly, just make it come about. So I don't want to say like it's all God breathed and God inspired, but it is all God breathed and God inspired, right? Like it's he just took it and he just transformed it into something that I didn't even think was possible.
Yeah, that sounds like my story with podcasting too, because I started out political, and then God told me the channel's not yours, it's mine. We're going to use it the way I want it to be used. So then I started doing devotions, and then I started getting into a really dark place because of all my seizures and everything I was getting. And I was like, I don't feel like doing devotions right now is being honest. So I stopped doing them as well. I was speaking with only half my face for a while. I was stuttering badly, but then God let me know when it was time to pick it up and start going again. And then he let me know when he wanted me to start doing interviews, and I prayed for interviews, and he flooded me with interviews. And
I
now
love
I'm booked
it.
solid, and halfway, actually most of the way through June, I'm booked solid, and it's fantastic. I love doing this, and I love hearing people's testimonies. I think it is just absolutely such a blessing to hear people like yourself speak, and it's really inspiring and encouraging. So
Yeah.
in the Butterfly Blueprint, what is the main core of that book about?
These are so hard questions to be concise and succinct here. Okay. The main core is really based on the verse 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the old is gone and the new has come. Like, you are a new creation in Christ. So really talking about what it means to shed your past, your worries, your fears, your regrets, anything that you're holding on to that you feel defines you in a negative way. It's getting rid of that, letting go of it, and stepping into, of course, we know butterflies have this cocoon, right? So we're stepping into this idea of like, it's going to be hard, it's going to be pressing, might be painful, probably suffocating in a way, because essentially when the butterfly does enter the cocoon, it gets broken down into like goo, like nothing.
It really is amazing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. It's like it is broken down to like the very essence of like just minimal like building blocks, and then it's built back up and transformed into something that is not even really recognizable from the caterpillar. And that's really kind of like the core of what the butterfly blueprint is. The subtitle is How to Renew Your Mind and Grow Your Faith. And really, when it comes down to it, you renew your mind by letting go of the worldly perspective, what the world says to focus on, what the world says to think about and concentrate on, and step into the eternal perspective, who God says I am, what God says I need to focus on, what God says matters. And one of those, incidentally, happens to be sharing your story and sharing your testimony. And so that's why I feel like the work you're doing, Tony, is so important. We share our stories because we don't know who needs to hear our story, but we know that we need to continue to step out in faith to share our story. The need for us to share our story is greater than the need for us to stay guarded. And so the premise is to be a butterfly, and what it looks like to be a butterfly is to go share your story with others and go develop that encouragement and that support and accountability that is so important as you continue to walk this walk and be that new creation that God has called you to be.
And I love how you point out that you never know who you're reaching. Because when I stopped doing my devotions, I actually started getting emails and messages saying, you need to keep going with this. Like, we need to hear more. And even yesterday, I got a comment on one of my videos from a person I don't even know at all. And they said, you're a really great interviewer. And I'm like, well, thank you. Like, I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
And I think part of that is because I don't like stiff, staunch interviews. I like that conversation. It needs to feel like a natural flow. Yeah. Rather than a grilling. Like
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I also talk about in the book is that our vulnerability and our authenticity and our transparency help us to connect with others. And so, yeah, I totally agree with you. It's taking off the I'm fine face, if you
Yeah.
will, and really like letting people see you, get to know you in a safe space. So, yeah, absolutely. I think sharing our stories, and we share them and we don't necessarily know what the outcome will be, but God does. And we just trust that our responsibility is obedience, and then he will take care of the outcome. And I'll tell you what, if you just continue to live your life like I will just continue to be obedient to what God has for me and he will take care of the outcome, then it'll take a lot of pressure off of you.
Yeah, it does. You feel a lot more at peace,
Yeah.
and I love that. It's like my one pastor, uh, he was talking about Thomas and how once Thomas lost that doubt, he came to that moment of peace
Yes.
and that willingness to just do whatever God and Christ wanted him to do. And I'm like, that is so true in all of our lives. And I thought of that when I was reading your book too. I'm like, that is just so true, and it fits so well into what you're saying. And for everybody who's wondering, we're going to be covering the cocoon stage this afternoon, so
The fun part.
stay tuned for that. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Losing that I'm fine face. So how did you become a writing and spiritual growth coach?
So I started out in the spiritual growth coach realm. Again, I was at a low point. I was newly married. We moved away from family and friends. I left my job. Like I was having this whole identity crisis type thing. Who am I? What am I doing? And I remember for some reason, God gives me these very specific moments in time where he just like reveals himself to me. But I remember just crying out to him and pleading with him and asking him, okay, Lord, I don't know what my purpose is, but can you just tell me, like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do with myself and my life? And then he led me to the verse in the Bible, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper, plans to hope, plans to give you hope in a future, or plans to prosper, not to harm, plans to give you hope in a future. And I was like, okay. And then he led me to like this devotion that was talking about a Christian life coach. And I said, I don't really know what that is. I have a psychology background, funny enough. I was used to like kind of the psychology aspect. And again, I had my psychology degree because I wanted to teach and do research. I had no interest in seeing clients, no interest in counseling, no interest in seeing people at all. That's why I said you gotta be careful because God's like, okay, I see that you don't have an interest in connecting with people because now on the other side, like I can't get enough of it. But what led me to pursue that coaching was really just that moment where I was in such a dark place of not knowing who I was and what I was supposed to do that God really revealed to me, pursue this path in this direction. And I did, and it's been great since. And since then, I have kind of transitioned. I don't want to say pivoted, but I have kind of transitioned or even transformed, to use terminology I use frequently in my book, to look at spiritual growth and the creative process and the writing process, and really helping other people share their story and share their God-given message and be the equipped, called writers that God has called us to be. So sharing your story, knowing you have a message to share, and helping writers gain that consistency and that confidence and even that clarity piece on what it looks like to move forward into that. It's one thing to know that God has placed a book idea or your story on your heart, and it's another thing to actually be able to write that out and be able to tell that story and share that story. And at this point, I have just stepped fully into that area of my coaching and of helping other people really get the message out and get their message out with that confidence and with that understanding that, God's going to use it and do great things with it. So kind of leading into this idea of helping other people share their story from knowing how important it is for people to share their story.
And I think it's important no matter what walk of life you're from.
Yes.
So some of the people I'm going to be having on the show are going to be like musicians that it's like, oh, I actually recognize those names. And other authors, and there's pastors, or there's just regular people from regular walks of life. And if anybody wants to share their story, just shoot me an email, tpeters745@gmail.com or coolexplorations.com, and we'll let people hear your story. How has becoming a writing and spiritual growth coach, how has that helped you in your own personal walk with God?
Oh my goodness.
I know, another tough question.
I know. I feel like, when God calls you to do something, at first you're like, okay, that sounds nice, but it's not for me. Like I don't have what it takes. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any value to add. All of those negative thoughts really that really seek to hold us back from what we are being called to pursue. But I feel like pursuing this type of coaching and helping other people grow spiritually through the writing process and things like that and creative process, it's helped me continue to seek God and lean on God and grow my relationship and my faith with Him. There's something to be said about remembering and recognizing that we are creative spiritual beings. Creativity is not necessarily even something that we have or don't have, but God, the creator himself, created us to create. And so when we look at that and we are able to know that we are creating, whether it's writing or painting or drawing or anything like that, from that place of obedience and that place of just God-given purpose and direction, it just brings about a much greater appreciation, understanding, and awareness of what we're doing here, of what we're being called to do and what we're being asked to share. So what's really helped me walk through that is leaning on the fact that it's not up to me to say the right words or do the right thing or write a perfect book. Like these are these are God's words in this book. And before we started the video, I was sharing with Tony, I said, I'm hearing you say my words in my book, and I'm thinking, who wrote that? I don't even remember writing that. Like, it's crazy to have that experience where these words that you said are still resonating with you as new as they did, even though you wrote them. So I feel like God is constantly uncovering things and reminding me of things that continue to encourage me so I can continue to encourage and equip others.
Yeah, and I think I echoed there. The creative process is meant to be a spiritual experience. And in my last Sunday school, we're taking like creation.com and we're learning some of the creation stuff. And it actually was amazing how quickly the creative process began with people, because right away, Adam's immediate descendants, like sons and grandkids, they created the first instruments and the first music. And then we see David continue that whole process, and Solomon, and like, it's just amazing how much creative stuff was in the Bible and how it was used to worship and glorify God.
Yeah.
And it's a good spiritual connection. So I think that is incredibly important, and something I really respect in what you've been saying there. So we've been talking about sharing our testimonies. So how important is sharing your testimony, and why is that so important for you to be willing to share your testimony with other people?
Yeah. I feel like if I haven't already hammered it into the listeners already, like, here we go again, your story, to hear someone share something and then to be able to identify at whether or not you guys are in the trenches together. For example, I'm a mom. I have, 2 young kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So if I'm sharing a particular struggle and someone else hears that and comes up to me and says, hey, I also can't stop getting my kids to fight too. It's just this simple of thing like, me too, you're not alone, you're not doing anything wrong. And not to make it specifically about moms, but I feel like moms, we place a lot of pressure and expectations on ourselves. And so to just hear someone say, hey, my kids do that exact same thing, like it's nothing that you did, like that's just how it is. That Me Too, and of course that Me Too movement has a whole other connotation, but like that Me Too, you are not alone, like I see you type mentality is invaluable. And then of course on the other side, it's walking through some really heavy things. I've had clients who have walked through some heavy things, and they have been able to meet people or connect with people that have walked through that, whether that is like a cancer diagnosis or a loss of a loved one, and what it looks like to walk through that grief process. It's as simple as like, how did you get through what you got through? And by someone willing to share their story and say, hey, by the grace of God, and this is how it looked in my life, that it gives that other person hope and lets that other person know that they're not alone. The only other thing I want to say about sharing your story and even sharing your testimony is it does not have to be some sort of grand big thing where you were doing this and then, all of these bad things, and then you turn and you transform and you do something new. Because I feel like the enemy wants to tell us that we need some sort of big like story in order to share our story. And that's not necessarily true. I want to encourage you that your pain is personal. And so not to compare your experiences or your pain or what's hard for you with other people who are struggling or other people who have really hard things. I think the worst thing we can do is compare. I'm really having a hard time with this, but they have it so much harder. There's so much more going on. So if they're able to deal with that, then why can I not deal with this? And I just want to encourage you that your pain is personal and your story is personal, and not to make it, I should not be feeling this way. Why do I feel this way? At least I don't have to do this. I should just be grateful for what I have, because I feel like the enemy wants to come in and he wants to just throw all these darts at you and make you think that you don't need to share your story. No one knows what you're talking about. No one's ever experienced that. Why share your story? And I know one of the key points in my book is that if Satan can isolate us, he can influence us. So if we can feel like we're all alone on an island by ourselves and no one's going to relate, well, then he can start to really try to do some, mind games. So what we really need to remember is as soon as we share what's going on and being real and authentic and transparent, like I've talked about already, that there's just a relief and a release that everything that I have been carrying on to is gone, and I've given it over, and I've been able to share in an open space, and sharing my story about what I've walked through and how I walked through it gives other people hope and encouragement to know that they're not alone and that they too can do the same.
Exactly. And with that, you were talking about your shift from being a spiritual growth coach into more of the writing side of things. What kind of triggered that for you, that you were going to start making that more of a priority instead of the other one? How did God maybe lead you in that direction?
Yeah, so with the spiritual growth coaching, it was great. It was wonderful. My husband was in the military, so we moved around a couple times. So there was a lot of like starting and shifting and building up, and then dealing with kids. I had 2 kids. So just life really. The season that I was in after the spiritual growth coaching, it was something that I kind of put aside for a little bit and focused more on the writing and the speaking and less on the coaching. So when we moved here about a year ago, I felt God calling me to really pursue that coaching. Like, okay, your kids are getting a little older. funny thing, I'm going to have a newborn again, so I'm going to start cycle all over. but but your kids are getting a little older, and I felt God calling me to like, okay, it's time to pursue that coaching. And to be 100,000% honest with you, because I've been talking about transparency and vulnerability, like I was scared. Feel like the coaching that I was doing, I was limiting myself because of fear. What if I say the wrong things, or what if I put myself out there and no one agrees, or no one accepts the help that I have to offer. And so when I decided to pursue coaching the second time around, it was really like, okay, Lord, I'm going to walk. I'm going to take that step. I'm going to walk. I'm going to jump. I'm going to do what you have me to do, because I know that this is greater than me and my comfort level and how I feel about myself. And so just knowing that, I was able to, funny enough, pursue this certification program that kept popping up on my Facebook ad. And I was like, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool. But yet I couldn't get off of it. I couldn't ignore it. So I listened to this certification, and I applied for the certification for the writing coaching through Hope Writers, if anyone's familiar with that. And it was something that just sparked something completely different inside of me. I underwent another transformation just pursuing that writing coaching certification, that just really led me and really solidified me that like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what God has me doing right now in this season of my life, helping other writers just grow in their writing and just helping them clarify their message, become consistent in writing amongst the noise and the chaos and just everyday life, and also just have the confidence to keep moving forward. Because I know what it's like to look at that draft and say, this is terrible, and want to delete the whole thing. Don't do that, by the way. If you're a writer and you're listening, don't do that. But it's one of those things where you can walk alongside of someone and support them. And to know that you believe in the people that you're helping and the stories that people are sharing, I think is invaluable. A couple of my clients now have just told me, like, you told me that, my story does matter, and I need to continue to share. And she was like, I needed to hear that more than you'll probably ever know. And that's really what it's about. It's encouraging other people to continue to put their message out there and share it. And I'm just here, just being humbled every day, and God using me to just help other people continue to put forth their message that God has given them with confidence.
That is fantastic, I think. Where can we find you and your book online? Whoa.
Yes. So you can find me online. In terms of my website, it's butterfly, and then there's a little hyphen or dash, however you want to say it, beginnings.com. So butterfly-beginnings.com. There you can learn more about the coaching that I offer. We can talk, you can read my blogs. You can see like, okay, you're a writer, you can write. And then there's also speaking and stuff too. And for the book, you can find, there you go. You can find the book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, The Butterfly Blueprint, How to Renew Your Mind and Grow Your Faith. And if you do visit the website, there's an option to download a scripture writing plan. And that is just a way to stay connected with me, and stay connected as part of the spiritual growth and writing creative hodgepodge community. And I'll continue to share some writing resources, some spiritual growth resources. One of them being a writing out your testimony guide. How many of us have been like, I want to write out my testimony, I want to write out my God story, but I have no idea where to start. So you're able to sign up for that scripture writing plan immediately. I would love to send you this new guide that I actually just created that I'm super excited about, to help you walk through and piece through the parts of your story that are really going to be able to resonate with people the most, the ones that matter as you share your testimony.
And a question all authors get: are you planning to put out any further books?
Are you going to laugh at me if I say that I'm working on 2 books simultaneously right now?
No, I've got like 3 on the go, and
See?
I don't have time to write very much anymore, and I don't really feel like that's where God's calling me. So I haven't really picked up well, not pen anymore, but the keyboard, I guess. It used to be pen, but
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't really felt like writing. And everybody keeps asking me that exact question: when are you putting out your next book? I'm just like, I don't know.
I know. Yeah. And it was really, I have not written for myself. And this book was published, Butterfly Blueprint was published in 2020. So it had been several years. So I just recently started just writing for my, like, an idea that I had that God gave me, and I just started writing. Um, and that was related to kind of this whole idea of creative growth, and the creative process is a spiritual process, and what that looks like as a writer and just also as a creative. And then there was this other little idea that God gave me way back when. He actually gave me the title of the book first. And then I started writing it and typing it out, and I got stuck. So then I put it away, and I'm like, okay, well, got stuck. I'm going to put it back. But recently, again, that second project, God, I felt him calling me and kind of picking that up again. But that book particularly looks at how we continue to walk in the ways of Jesus and continue to walk of the ways that we are called to walk in when everyone else is just coming at us from the opposite direction. So how we can live the life that we are called to live in a culture that is just pushing up against us. And I think just immediately of when you're in a really heavily trafficked area and you're trying to like forge your way through and push your way through and walk through, but everyone else is just kind of coming at the opposite direction. So those are the 2 book ideas. They're both being worked on, not as much as I would like. That is one of my goals. But again, I have such a piece that when it's time to put it forth more effort, and when it's time to write it and get it out, that God will let me know. Because just like with the Butterfly Blueprint, there were things in that book that happened in between that time where I put it on hold and then picked it back up that are in the book. So same thing, I think, just life experiences and things that God wants to teach me and show me to continue to help me write the book, because after all, they're his words and not mine.
Exactly. So what advice would you give anybody who's out there and they're either stuck spiritually or they're stuck with their writing? What's one piece of advice that you'd like to leave them with?
Yes. So I would say not to ignore that tension or that uneasiness that you feel, whether or not it is writing related or spiritual related. You know, one of the things I talk about in the book is like, are you going through the motions and just, not getting anywhere, not thinking that you're growing, just kind of doing things to do, but no longer experiencing it. So I would say not to ignore that and to really lean into that and press into that. And if you are a believer and if you do believe in God, I would just continue to seek him in prayer, or maybe, just start out in prayer and come to him openly and honestly and let him know what you're struggling with, how you're feeling, and just be open and honest, because he wants to come and help us, and he wants to come show us the way. I always say that he is a gentleman. He's going to knock on the door. He's not necessarily going to tear the door down. So he's knocking on the door of your heart, honestly, and just saying, come give it to me, come release it over. Like, I'm here. I can help you. I can literally transform you from a caterpillar to a butterfly. You just have to trust me. So that would be for like the spiritually struck. Just lean into prayer, lean into what God is wanting to tell you, and don't ignore that, because you only know what you know. So there's a whole other side, a whole other point, a whole other way of life that you don't know. So I would encourage you to stay curious and really lean into that. And for the writer that is stuck, something that a real practical tip that helps me is just journaling. Just free write anything, all the things, share about how you're thinking or what you're thinking, how you're feeling, what's annoying you, what's going on. I would just encourage you to start journaling, not because you're gonna, publish your journals and share them with the world, but just to get in the habit and the practice of realizing that God meets us on the pages that we write, and he meets us as writers when we actually start writing and doing the work, not thinking about it, not talking about it, actually starting to, and for journaling, I do put pen to paper, but actually starting to put pen to paper and write. So I would encourage you, if you have all these things and you don't know where to focus, just let all of these things out so you can have just this process and this release of your words, and hopefully it'll be helpful. It's a discipline definitely to start journaling or writing out, a free write every day, but it is so worth it. It's actually my sanity. That's what I tell everyone. I'm like, I don't know how I existed or lived without doing like my morning journaling pages. So I would encourage the writers. And if you're not even a writer, anytime you actually write something, you actually are a writer. I hate to tell you that. So I would just encourage you to start journaling. That's also just a great way to process things and get them out of your head onto paper.
Yeah, my journaling process is poetry. That's definitely, I have a poetry book that's published, and it just that's definitely one of my outlets. Some of the poetry in my book I have under the section of dark poetry, because it was during some of my deepest depression moments.
Yeah.
And it was just my way of, like you say, sanity, keeping yourself sane. And even sometimes if I'm having problems sleeping, usually it's because there's all kinds of words jumbling around. So I'll pull out my phone and I'll just start like typing them into my phone in the notes section. And then in the morning I'll come back to them and I'll be like, okay, well, let's formulate this into an actual poem.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah, don't make the mistake thinking that you're gonna remember it in the morning. Because if you go to bed thinking it and you're like, I'm too tired to go over and write it down, then it really does go away. I don't know what happens when we sleep, but it literally just like poof gone, and then you try to remember it the next day and you're like, I got nothing.
Yeah, I've lost so many ideas that way.
Yeah.
So many. So before we sign off, is there any final thoughts that you want to share?
Let's see, a final thought. Well, this has been lovely. I love talking about this stuff. I could do this all day, every day, in case you couldn't tell. I just want to encourage those people who are listening that might be just struggling or feeling spiritually stuck, either as a writer or just in their spiritual life, to lean into, like we talked about before, that stuckness, and to just encourage you that God has a purpose, God has a plan, God has something greater than what you're going through right now, and to just continue to lean into what he's called you to do, and just those small steps of obedience. And as a final kind of culmination, bringing everything together, our transformation really emerges from our transparency. So to be able to share our story with other people and to share our testimony with others, not only helps the other person know that they're, not the only person going through it, or know that they're not alone, but it helps transform us, because we start to allow others in, and we can just continue to share our heart and share the truth of God's word and what God has done for us. So sharing your story is never about you. You are making an impact. You are leaving a ripple effect that you will probably not know the full extent of. So that's my encouragement to you. You never know what you're doing actually has, the implication it has, but we know that God takes just our smallness, and he just transforms it into something huge. So I would love to connect with you guys too, if you guys want to hear more about this or talk more about writing and what it looks like as spiritual growth or anything like that in the creativity realm. Please email me, find me on the website. I didn't even give my social media, but Instagram and Facebook. It's Stephanie Miller Coach, all one word. So I would love it. And I just want to say, just go forth, be blessed, and go be the beautiful butterflies that God has called you to be.
Great final thought there. I love that. Thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and I really am truly enjoying your book. It's fantastic. Even the second time here where I'm going through it, it's there's more gems you get just by reading something a second time. So thank you for coming on, and thanks for writing your book.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.